15 years ago, the landscape of internet creativity, of the proto-social indie tech scene, was radically different than the social media of today. In this series, we're going back from 2007 onwards to tell stories of indies, of rebellious hackers, of talented, impatient communities of nerds who somehow kept ending up one step ahead of big businesses. The heyday of blogs, the reinvention of the smartphone, and the dawn of the jailbreak. Along the way, we'll trace the origins of the modern social web, the back and forth of content ownership and self-publishing, and the platforms that defined each era. By the end, after uncovering half a decade of tumultuous history, I'll dive into my own connection to the hackerspace, from self-taught Minecraft modding to open source iPhone tweak publishing. Every year, it gets harder to contextualize and understand these periods of tech tomfoolery. More than that, it's getting nigh impossible to use these things, to even see how they worked, especially considering things like blogging, Minecraft, and iOS jailbreaking are still constantly in flux. So, this series is a dive into internet eras and culture of tech art, into the defunct startups who went spelunking into a new space. And of course, once that stage is set, I'm excited to dive into the nitty-gritty, the whys and hows of the dozen or so Minecraft mods, and over about 60 jailbreak tweaks that I ended up helping out with, starting when I was just 16, from tiny solo projects to collaborations with people across the world. And before I moved on, how those tweaks saw over 250,000 downloads. And now, through this series, I can hopefully share the lessons I learned and preserve those efforts. In a way, memorialize those ambitions of the past, before the code fades into obscurity. After all, the motivation was timeless. Just like everyone else, we wanted to break things and put them back together again in our own vision. Welcome to Internet Eras Part 1.
Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything.
In the wake of Apple's launch of the App Store in 2007, before Minecraft's first pre-release in 2009, and in the midst of Web 2.0, there was a tangible gusto for bootstrapped, home-brewed projects. Sitting down at a bedroom PC was, for many, akin to sitting at the potter's wheel. The rapidly dropping cost of cobbling together software, and the widening availability of deep technical knowledge, was influencing new generations of creatives across the globe. But what exactly is bootstrapping or homebrewing? In this context, bootstrapping is building up a project from scratch, usually as a solo or small team project. Importantly, without the direct help from outside sources or investors. And interestingly enough, the etymology of bootstrapping pervades over a dozen different industries and has roots in literal boots, as in to pull oneself up by one's bootstraps. The version of bootstrapping we're looking for is not the 19th century paradoxical idiom, nor the 1950s era description of hardwired computer boot instructions, but the empoweringly businessy one, where, curiously, the Big Apple themselves are given mention on the dense Wikipedia page on the subject. Quote, bootstrapped companies such as Apple Inc. have also claimed that they attribute some of their success to the fact that this method of funding enables them to remain highly focused on a specific array of profitable products. Although, as I've seen while researching many of my previous videos, trusting these sweeping statements on Wikipedia should be done very cautiously. Sadly, of course, there's no substitute for first-hand accounts and genuine published research. In this case, from a cursory glance at the sources and some searches online, I'm not so sure Apple has made this claim anytime recently, if at all. In fact, it's no secret that Apple struggled with investors for the vast majority of its history, nearly causing it to go bankrupt in the 1990s. Anyway, back to bootstrapping and, well, homebrewing. Homebrewing, in my opinion, is a much more imaginative, evocative descriptor. Like microbrewing beer, there's one too many tale of startups starting with soldering irons and motherboards, not from a warehouse, but from a garage. garage. That scrappy, do-it-yourself mentality that is associated with the boom of self-starters that surged into relevancy with the dawn of the home computer, and especially into the mid-aughts. The maturing surface of the web, the ease of access to entire communities of knowledge. This time period, the era surrounding Y2K especially, was the unceremonious opening, the virtual barriers dissolving for the personal web as we know it today. Before the caustic, grifter-tainted world of Web 3, there was the humble Web 2.0. But what was Web 2.0? Well, there's much debate about the origin of the term, but there's no doubt that it came to define this exact era from the early 2000s into the early 2010s. Web 2.0 was the participatory web, the mainstreaming of two-way communication as the driver for user content, the momentous shift that heralded in the now ongoing reinvention of internet communities and how we interact and contribute to them.
By now, you've probably heard the buzz about Twitter, the social networking site that uses microblogging to keep people connected. Now, in the third part of our Web 2.0 series, we ask, can a simple tweet help you market your business?
And adorably, the terminology is something of a double entendre, both representing the turning of the page from the first generation to the second, but also itself using the codified terminology of software 2.0. As early as the 1970s, we have proof of this decimal-based notation system for expressing change in software. But by the age of the 2000s, we have the canonized world of semantic versioning, where each number has a definite and well-reasoned place, or as author Tom Preston Werner, inventor of Gravatars and co-founder of GitHub, eloquated, in the world of software management there exists a dread place called dependency hell. As a solution to this problem, I propose a simple set of rules and requirements that dictate how version numbers are assigned and incremented. I call this system semantic versioning. Under this scheme, version numbers and the way they change convey meaning about the underlying code and what has been modified from one version to the next. But let's get back to Web 2.0. In the early 2000s, there was MySpace, Blogger, and Foursquare, corners of the internet that could be dressed up and customized to each represent a mini-platform, an identity, for what would become the first generation of social media content creators. All these networks rode on the coattails of their predecessors, and are impressive achievements, many born of bootstrapped teams with the mantra, "I'll do it better. Just you watch." Take MySpace, for example. It was the social networking titan of its time. In fact, it was the most popular social network in the world from 2005 to 2008. As described in Sean Percival's '08 book, MySpace Marketing, Creating a Social Network to Boom Your Business. Trust your users. Giving users almost complete freedom on MySpace empowered the very vocal and powerful internet generation. They took this freedom and ran with it when creating their own private space online. In the process, they added Fonzie levels of cool to MySpace and brought all their real-world friends along with them. But MySpace wasn't the first of its kind. Starting in August 2003, MySpace was a literal technical spin-off of a business-focused marketing platform, eUniverse. eUniverse, lambasted as Spam 1.0, was the dangerously successful engine behind a huge amount of the adware and email scraping tech of the Y2K era. When the MySpace founders Tom Anderson and Chris DeWolf realized that they could jumpstart a competitor to Friendster.com using the bones and know-how of eUniverse, they bootstrapped a prototype in apparently just 10 days. One of its most explosive features was the sheer volume of customizability. From the get-go, the goal was to let users create any online persona they choose. Arguably that, along with the reasonable load times and piggybacking off of eUniverse's user base and the eUniverse CEO Brad Greenspan's connections to one of the most successful dating sites at the time, Cupid Junction, amalgamated into a potent fuel, propelling MySpace into the #1 social media spot by March 2004. For better and for worse, MySpace would then blossom into Spam 2.0. Specifically for worse, the whole site is, in essence, a marketing tool that everyone who registers has access to. In the world of MySpace, spam is earth, air, fire, and water. And yet, for better, MySpace has become a sort of super public portal, entry to a world defined by an ever-changing digital architecture that creates pathways for connection between individuals who might otherwise, even elsewhere on the internet, never have met. But wait a second, what was that about Friendster again? What was Friendster about? Friendster was another progenitor to the social networking movement, launched just 1 year earlier in 2002. Instead of being directly siphoned off from a marketing platform and a dating website, Friendster was squarely, allegedly forged with the initial goal of competing with popular subscription fee dating services, such as Match.com. And Friendster was driven to create an individualized version of a different business platform that was popular at the time, Rise. Preceded and influenced by Rise, a social networking site which focused on business, Friendster offered a new twist. The site connected people through networks of friends for the specific purpose of dating and making new friends. Rise was sort of an early take on the LinkedIn strategy, with a focus on events and real-world networking. It had just been launched in the summer of 2001, and saw its own meteoric rise for the time. By 2003, it had spread across apparently over 100 countries. By 2005, they reportedly had over 250,000 members across 200 countries, and by 2007, that had turned into more than 500,000. Rise, unlike most of the platforms we'll cover today, is remarkably still alive, pretty much untouched, with its original homepage and styling completely intact. In the early teens, Rise's homepage described them as having more than 600,000 members, and from 2017 on, Rise boasts of having over 1 million. My favorite part, the first testimonial, unchanged throughout this entire time, for over 20 years, quote, "Rise is one of the hottest sites on the web. James Hong, hotornot.com. Meanwhile, it would take Friendster nearly a decade to fizzle out and relinquish its throne, inevitably falling to its contemporaries. After blowing up to 3 million users in a matter of months, with a corporate board of industry superstars, founder Jonathan Abrams was pushed out with a little bit of money and a reputation as an arrogant kid 2 months after Facebook launched. 6 years later, in August 2008, although long forgotten by social media junkies in the United States, Friendster was still Asia's #1 network. In that same month, Friendster would be described as the formative social network of the modern web era that made a verb for roller coaster failure. The writing was on the wall. The following year, in 2009, it was acquired for just under $30 million by an online payments provider in Malaysia, a far cry from its theoretical valuation a mere 6 months before, which situated it between $98 and $273 million. A year later, in 2010, it would sell off its patents to Facebook for a whopping $20 million, and by 2015, it would shut down indefinitely. At least, as far as we know. Next up, much like the individuality offered by MySpace, there was Blogger, a way for anyone to make hubs for everything they were interested in. Not just a single site, but a multitude of blogs, each with a distinct personality. And Blogger was my first serious introduction to blogging. Blogger may be comparable, but also quite a bit different than its modern contemporaries, than the more social-leaning projects of today, like Medium, Ghost, and Substack. Blogger emphasized the bare-bones creativity of both writing and site design. My favorite feature, the openness of building as many blogs as you wanted, apparently up to 100 per account. Instead of targeting the now ever-present people as brands, influencer-based marketing, Blogger's attitude can be refreshingly summarized in its tagline, just 3 words: push button publishing. And the origins of Blogger Blogger is also a little different from its contemporaries in the midst of the dot-com boom. We were three friends, funded by doing annoying contract web projects for big companies, trying to make our own grand entrance onto the internet landscape. What we were originally trying to do doesn't matter so much now, but while doing it, we created Blogger, more or less on a whim, and thought, that's kinda interesting. Now we're a small, but slightly bigger than before team in Google, focusing on helping people have their own voice on the web and organizing the world's information from the personal perspective, which has pretty much always been our whole deal. When I created my first Blogger site, it felt like a way to capture a moment in time, to etch the history of a thing that happened to me. Today, I hear about much the same goal, whether for better or worse, from the double-edged sword of content creation. After all, for a creator with an audience, it's important to experience something that can be sort of canonized onto the lore of their YouTube channel, marked as good content. Yes, it's good to travel and try new things. It's better to essentially enter it as a chapter in your autobiography. In a sense, be the producer of your biopic that continues indefinitely. Put your pen to the page. If other people have done a similar thing, trust in your creative process, your vision and dedication. Then there's no way that you'll end up at the same result. After all, if content is meant to tell the story of your life, only you can put those words in that order. Sadly, although Blogger still lives today, it's kind of a skeleton of what it once was, gradually being stripped of its own identity after being acquired by Google in 2003, over 20 years ago. But the way was paved, and as speeding down the superhighway went from dial-up to broadband, brand new users went from the nerdy adults depicted in Dilbert to the geeky teens iconic of Tumblr, not to mention Neopets, Club Penguin, and Webkins. Dilbert, before its disgraced creator Scott Adams fell down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, was an icon of the late 90s and early 2000s nerd culture. At one point, it was even the basis for a pretty decent animated TV show, which, more surprisingly, is still somehow relevant to today's soul-sucking corporate culture, with layoffs and full-time software engineering still a looming thing in today's mainstream tech economy. It's interesting to take a moment and reflect on the nexus of blogging and comics. Both mediums are usually not seen as prestigious as capital J journalism, but they can offer just as powerful a representation of culture, even sometimes a less filtered, less edited form of critique and analysis. Comics can be a full-on satire of current events, sometimes even an artistic, imagerial interpretation of the world around us. And it's the combination of blogging and comics that would blossom into a brand new category of webcomics. Dilbert existed in this crossroads as the eras of the internet bustled by. Thankfully, by 2005, we had arguably the most prominent of the webcomics, XKCD. XKCD has since become a bona fide bastion of internet culture. Just as The Simpsons did it first, now for internet trends, XKCD did it first. On the other hand, Club Penguin, Webkins, and Neopets were the foundation of a quirky, gamified world of social networking. Perhaps a warning sign for the astounding multi-billion-dollar market of mobile gaming. Those quasi-MMOs were targeted towards the youngest audience allowed on the net. They virtually invented the internet-injected playground, which can still kind of be found today in the most popular video games on the planet, Minecraft, Roblox, and Fortnite. But to go back to blogging, on the other hand, Tumblr and Foursquare were for the in-betweens. Not quite kids, not quite grown-ups. These were the online skate shops, malls, and bulletin boards. Tumblr originally was a kaleidoscope of creation. Take whatever form factor you have and push it onto your Tumblr. Instead of principally expecting text, photos, or videos, like what you see in today's YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, Tumblr wanted everything all at once. was kind of ahead of its time. When creating something on Tumblr, you chose the type of thing up front. Since Tumblr accepted all of it, it moved the challenge onto the user, on how to showcase it. Sometimes this meant your Tumblr was a blogging template, with all the bells and whistles you'd get from a blogger site. More often than not, however, this inspired Pinterest-like fluid design that shoved audio, video, GIFs, still images, text, everything but the kitchen sink into a sort of flexible inspo board for everyone to see. Chaotic as it would be, Tumblr was making yet another step, deeper and deeper into end-user personalization and hacking. Tumblr notably appealed to a different sort of audience from its nerdier predecessors, but at the same time, it was impressively able to pull a lot of those nerdier audiences onto its own platform, causing migrations from platform to platform as competition grew fiercer and faster. And speaking of restrictions causing creativity, Foursquare. Foursquare was also a simple idea, checking into locations, that spawned a smorgasbord of use cases. Instead of the review-oriented culture of Google Maps and Yelp and TripAdvisor, Foursquare was about gamifying and socializing your day-to-day experiences and explorations. Check in to get trophies and become the mayor of certain locations like your high school. Outline your favorite vacation spots so that you can share them with your friends before you even came home. This multifaceted, textured environment reminds me of the pre-iPhone era of pocket devices. Rather than create an all-in-one tool, each website, each app was specific and intentionally limited, the anti-super app. And it's precisely those limitations that, I would argue, drew more inspiration from each passionate user base. Instead of pressuring the user to contain a boundless set of options, these places put up guardrails and asked you to bowl down the carefully curated lanes. Phew, with all that set, it's time to set the stage for a new era. Mobile. Like with the launch of the Apple Vision Pro, and before it the Apple Watch, and before that the iPad, no one could have predicted that a new form factor for Apple's techno-luxury late-to-the-party attractions could be successful. And truthfully, it remains to be seen if the Apple Vision has the same potential as those other things. But it's clear that the first iPhone was the opening bell for a new economy, a new industry for personal tech. The world of Web 2.0 was about to evolve and to be broadened. Now, we didn't just have different web browsers. We had completely different computers to design and develop for. And we didn't just build blogs, websites, and games. It was time to build apps, a shorthand that would be forever burned into our minds as the more approachable, friendlier, personable version of software, shareware, programs, or even just applications. In the next episode, we'll talk about how the App Store, for the better, legitimized one-man indie projects, at least as much as it did high-budget corporate constructions, and for the worse, by chipping away at that hacker mentality and building up a walled garden while communities were trying to flourish, picking up the slack for what we now understand as basic smartphone features, like setting wallpapers, copy and paste, and recording videos, along with a lot more. I hope to see you. Maybe we'll even touch on Minecraft mods. But that's for next time, because we're just getting started with internet eras. Thanks for coming by. And if you liked this one, make sure to leave all your thoughts in the comments below, as well as like and subscribe. I'll be back soon. Hopefully next week.